Hello and welcome to the High Peak Biker. Today we're going to introduce you to all elements of the CBT. Today, whilst riding some lovely Derbyshire roads and going through the town of Buxton where I do the CBT, I'll talk to you about the 5 elements of motorcycle training. Everything from the classroom based information, the training on the pad and the 2-hour road ride. I'll end up at Swains Centre in Buxton where I work as a CBT instructor, and where I'll hopefully see you one day to do your training.
So go and get a cup of tea and join me, the High Peak Biker, talking about the CBT. Compulsory Basic Training is something that everybody has to do if they haven't got a licence to ride a motorbike. So if you're 16 and you want to ride a motorbike, you're limited to a maximum 50cc. When you're 16, you can do the CBT training and ride one of those bikes. When you're 17, that certificate continues to work for you, but you're able to ride the 125. If you're 17 or above, then you can take your CBT on a 125. That can be an automatic or geared. That's for both age groups. Once you've got your CBT certificate, that lasts for 2 years. And the aim in that 2 years that the DVSA would like to see is you progressing and taking your tests so that you can have a full licence for that vehicle. The majority of people don't take a test on a 125, but they take a test following the direct access scheme for larger capacity bikes, which we'll cover in another video anyway. It's not a test. Some people say it's a test and you can pass and fail it. Well, it's not a test. You get a certificate at the end of the day if I, as the instructor, not examiner, but instructor, think that you're safe to ride that bike on the road and continue your learning journey by yourself without anybody else instructing you. At the end of the day, it might be that I decide you're not safe, in which case I'm not going to say that you failed. I am going to say that you need to come back for some more training. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Some people just take a little bit longer in order to get proficient at some of the skills. Sometimes people can do some aspects of it absolutely perfectly. They just can't get their head around certain things. So, what we'll do today is talk about what the CBT is, what you have to do in order to show proficiency. So, introduced in 1990 is a certificate that you achieve saying that you're competent and safe to ride on the road by yourself. It's split into 5 elements: A, B, C, D and E. In element A, we'll have an introduction to me, the instructor, and we'll make sure that we're doing an eye test as well to make sure that you can see a number plate at 20 metres. It's 20 metres or 20.5 metres depending on the type of number plate. Also in that session we'll talk about the aims of the course, both the aims set by the DVSA for the CBT of safety and skills and knowledge to ride motorbike on the road. But we'll also talk about your aims. What do you want to achieve? Why do you want to ride? And what kind of riding you're going to be doing? We'll talk about different types of riding during the day. Then we'll spend about half an hour really as part of that introduction talking about safety and talking about safety equipment, and we'll go from top to toe We'll start talking about the only piece of legal equipment that you have to wear, which is a helmet. And then we'll talk about all the other equipment and the choices that are associated with that. So we'll talk about jackets and trousers. We'll talk about boots and armour that you wear within the clothing. And we'll talk about air vests, and we'll talk about snoods, and we'll talk about gloves, and we'll talk about all the different things that bikers have to promote safety and security. So we'll talk about high vis, and we'll talk about fluorescent material clothes and things like that. Once we've done that, covering all aspects of the law as we have to, we'll then go down and have a look at the bikes themselves, and that's quite an exciting time for a lot of people. For some people it's the first time they've been on a bike or even touched a bike. For everybody we do the same, because I need to be aware of what your knowledge is, and I'm not just going to say, do you know everything about bikes? And you say yes, and I say, well, let's go on to the next element then. We're going to test it. So we'll have a conversation and we'll question and answer session, and basically we talk about the motorbike and I introduce you to them. We've got a variety of bikes, but let's say we're looking at the CB125F, which is one of the main bikes that we have on our fleet, but we do have MT125s and we have twist and go scooters. But let's talk about the CB125F. And we'll talk about the fact that it's a geared bike and that it's fuel injected. And we'll talk about all of the controls on that bike. And we'll methodically go round the bike and talk about each and every one and how they all work in harmony. We will come back to that during the day when we're doing different skill activities. We'll also talk about things on this instrument cluster, like the indicators and the horn, and how you should be able to indicate and use the horn and use other buttons without looking down. We'll make sure that you're aware of all the different controls. I'll then also talk to you about checks, and we've got an acronym to remember what to check of BEST COPS. BEST COPS. The brakes, the electrics, the suspension, the tyres, the chain, the oil, talk about petrol and talk about steering. Now, whilst we're talking around those key letters, we'll also cover all the different areas of that bike. It's a time for you to ask questions, and the best candidates, best students, do ask questions and do engage in a lot of conversation. So, once we've done that, the second part of element B is to show that you can manually handle the bike. You can put it onto the side stand and take it off the side stand. You can put it on the centre stand and take it off the centre stand. And you can move that bike around both forwards and backwards in a straight line and going around a series of obstacles like cones. And we'll talk to you about how you hold the bike, how you walk with the bike, and the sorts of things you're looking out for that might trip you up, literally trip you up. So once we've done all that and you've shown that you can manually handle the bike, you will get your gear on, and that includes your gloves and your helmet, and we're all kitted up. You'll also legally be wearing a high vis, and it will have the Swains logo on it. That's a legal requirement. If you are not riding with an instructor, you don't have to wear one. If you are riding with an instructor, you do have to wear one. So, I'm going to head out on the A6 now, actually, and then take the nice little Chelmorton Road. That's a nice series of bends, and nice road for you to have a look at. So element C, you're going to show proficiency on the pad, and I'll show you the pad in a moment once we finish this ride at Swains. There's a series of things that you have to do. You have to first of all show that if you're riding a geared bike, that you understand the balance between the accelerator and the clutch, and how with slow manoeuvring you're controlling the forward motion of that bike more by releasing that clutch than you are by using the throttle. When you're putting power in the bank, if you like, with your right hand on the throttle, but you're moderating how much you release on the clutch. So we talk a bit about clutch control, and then you show that you can balance that clutch, find the biting point, and just go forward and then come to a stop without stalling it. So we'll talk about how to use the brakes as well. And the next 10 minutes or so, or for some people half an hour, is about practicing that and going forward and coming to a stop, and then going for a longer period of time along the pads and coming to a stop. And when we do come into a stop, it's always at a white line with your wheel just behind it. And that way I can judge that you can come to a stop in a controlled way, using just one brake first, then the other brake, and then both brakes. But all of this is in first gear. Once we've done that, I'll then do some slow manoeuvring with you, where I walk and you have to keep up with me. So if I increase my speed, you have to increase your speed. If I slow down, you've got to slow down. And it's all about this clutch control. If you try and moderate it with your right hand on the accelerator, it's going to be quite clunky, not smooth, and also not in full control. So we'll do that slow control, and then just to cement that, make sure that you're 100% okay with that clutch. We're going to go onto a figure of 8. It's two cones opposite each other, and you have to ride in between the two cones, round the end of one of them, back through the two cones, round the end of the other, and we'll show you that in another video and show you how to do it. We'll then set up our mirrors so that you can see everything behind you within reason, just the edge of your arms, and the bottom 50% of the road, the top 50% is above the horizon. Let me just pull in here for a moment. When you're looking in your mirrors, I can see certain things behind me. I can just see the edge of my arm, nothing more than that. I can see to the right back and to the left back, but there is a blind spot here. And that's what I do. That's a lifesaver. I'm checking to the left, to the right. Yeah, I'm not looking behind me. Some people do a lifesaver looking behind them like that. Don't do that. If you do that, look what's happening to the handlebars. I'm pulling that back. Now I just exaggerated a little bit, but you pull it back because your chin is pushing your shoulder back. Now if you're going along at 15-20 miles an hour, that might not affect you, but if you're going 70 miles an hour on a dual carriageway and you want to pull out into lane 2, that's going to cause a bit of a wiggle. So we're going to set our mirrors up. We're then going to talk about the whole procedure of changing our position, changing our speed, and it's based on OSMPSL. Observation, signal, manoeuvre, thinking about your position, making sure you got the right speed, and looking at and through and beyond that hazard. So observation, another word for that, is mirrors. So you're going to use your mirrors, but the observation is also what's ahead, what's to your side, what's at the back. But I'm checking my mirrors. A little dip of the head shows the instructor you're actually using your mirrors. Then I'm going to use that indicator without looking down, and I'm going to signal, for example, right if I want to turn right, Once it's signalled 2 or 3 times, I then want to move into the right position, into the next lane. I know it's clear, I've signalled, but just to make sure I do that lifesaver. Then I'm thinking about my position, my speed, and looking. We've got our mirrors set up, and that means we can change direction, we can do all sorts of things when we're out on the road. You notice when I'm riding, I'm looking in my mirrors probably every 15-18 seconds. We then talk about changing gear, and you'll do the process of changing gear around that pad, and you'll be changing first into second, into third, you'll be changing down into second to go around the corners, then accelerating a bit and going back into third. Very, very simply, changing gear is all about the balance of the accelerator and the clutch. If I'm changing down because I'm slowing down, I don't use my gears to do that. I come ABC, off the throttle. I'm going to do it now for you because there's nothing behind me. Off the throttle, bit of braking, get the speed, balance that clutch out, and then you can balance the accelerator. 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes riding around the pad, changing gear. Then I introduce to you the OSM PSL that we just talked about before. So when you're coming down that straight, I'll say I want you to turn right at the end, and I want to see you do the observation with the mirrors, I want to see the signal with the indicators, and then I want to see you do the shoulder check before you move into position, moderating your speed and looking at and through that junction. Now, you don't come to a junction and change from third down into second, carry on going, change down into first, carry on going, and then stop. You just adjust your speed by releasing that accelerator or throttle, and then braking, and then as you're coming to the junction and as you're coming to a stop, you pull that clutch in the last 2 meters and change down. Knock, 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 you're going to be down into first. So we've done right turns. We'll then talk about right turns that are rolling right turns, i.e. you're at a give way sign but there's nothing coming, and as you approach you can see there's nothing coming. You're 100% sure there's nothing coming, and so you can select the appropriate gear and carry on riding without actually stopping. We'll then do the same with left turns, which is pretty similar to right turns, only left turns are a little bit more complicated because when you turn into the road you've got less space. When you're turning right, you go across one lane into another, so you've got 1.5 lanes to turn. When you're turning left, you've only got half a lane to turn. So that's why you get curved curbs. So when you approach the left-hand junction, you can do half that turn, or 45 degrees, before you actually get onto the road. Magic. Turn, we'll then go back to right turns, but do right turns from a major road into a minor road. Quite a dangerous situation. You're going to be parked up in the middle of the road next to the white line, waiting to turn right, and you've got cars coming towards you and cars going past on your inside. So you've got to make sure your position's right, and we'll talk about that and have some drone footage to show you. The other thing about turning right is that you're going to do one of those lifesavers to get over to the white line, but you're going to do another one of those lifesavers before you actually turn. Make sure no one's filtering up past you. We'll go on to the next, which is U-turns. And being able to turn around in a side road. This isn't a side road, this is much wider than a side road. Side road's about 7.5 metres, and that's what the DVSA use for their Mod 1 with both feet on your pegs. The only way you can really do that successfully and fully control is by balancing that clutch and that throttle when you're in first gear, and using your right foot on that rear brake to adjust the speed as well if necessary. Then we'll talk about when we do shoulder checks and how we actually turn and the whole idea of you will go where you look, so don't look ahead, look around and at your landing point. And then the final thing that we need to do is the emergency stop. Very important emergency stop. You're going along, you're on full throttle and you're in fourth gear, somebody pulls out in front of you or a kid runs behind a van. It's the ABC of an emergency stop. Thanks Kurt Swain for teaching me that bit. ABC. A, take that accelerator off, you've got engine braking. Then onto your brakes, your front brake first, then your rear brake, and we'll talk about percentage of braking in another video. And then as the front end goes down, because you're slowing right down and the weight's going forward, you put more and more pressure on that front brake and release pressure a little bit on the back brake. Otherwise your back wheel might skid, because it gets lighter as the front goes down and gets heavy. The back gets up and gets light. And we'll talk about what happens if the wheels skid, the tyres skid because you've braked too hard. Now it's not generally because you braked too hard, it's because you've braked severely and too quickly. Hard braking doesn't necessarily make you skid, it's how you apply that pressure. So we'll talk about progressive braking. Do you know what the C is? Yeah, it's the clutch. And so at the very end, right at the last minute, that's when you pull that clutch in to make sure that you don't stall the bike. We've done everything. Go back up to the classroom and we do element D. We talk about a whole range of things. You should, before you come for your CBT, have a working knowledge of the highway code. I recommend that you do that. It's not something, oh, I've got to do it for CBT. You've got to do it to be safe on the road. But we'll talk briefly about that and get an idea of what your knowledge and skills are. We'll then talk about a whole range of things, different road surfaces, different weather types, why motorcyclists are vulnerable, but also what you do in order to make yourself safe. So we'll talk about highlighting potential dangers. We'll talk about defensive riding and being a sort of positive, safe rider who creates a bubble around them. And then we've got a whole series of scenarios on flip charts which we go through just to get your head working. What would you do in this situation? What would you do at a roundabout? Who gives way to who? When can you go? When can't you go? When do you indicate? When do you do lifesavers and shoulder checks? Traffic lights and turning right at traffic lights and turning left at traffic lights and what your positioning should look like. And we'll talk about turning left into a side road, turning right, and all of the things that we've talked about on the pad that we need to put into practice. We'll also talk about hill starts and things like that. And when we're out on the CBT, we'll stop a number of times and practice some of these things. So that's element D done. We'll then radio up. I will always check that everybody does still want to go out, and if I still want to go out with you, we'll go out on the bikes with the radios on. Here we are at Swains. This is the pad. So it's a lovely space, this is. We've got roads painted on it. So many providers just have a basic car park. We've got sort of the full range of road systems painted on it, as you can see here. Proper giveways, proper junctions, so you really understand what it's like to be on a road as much as you possibly can. Much better than a school car park, I think. These are the parallel lines here for your U-turn. So you'll be doing a U-turn here and turning in between these two white lines like this. So you can do it on any size motorbike very easily, but it takes practice. So you'll be doing practice. The blue cones here, you can see that's where you'll be doing the figure of eights, and along here you'll be doing the emergency stop. So let's just recap. We've done element A, which is looking at the safety. We've done element B, which is looking at the bike. We've done element C, which is here on the pad, and then we've gone up into the classroom, which is up there in the building, and we've done element D. The final bit is element E. When you are with a provider, element E should be 2 hours on the road. And we're out on the road for 2 hours because what I need to do is be able to see that you can do all of the things that we've been looking at, all the different scenarios. So we'll do left turns, right turns, roundabouts, traffic lights, stop signs, hill starts. We'll do U-turns, we'll stop and do U-turns, and we'll stop and do emergency stop as well. Doing all of these things here on a pad is one thing. Doing it in a live situation is another. On the road you will only have a maximum of 2 people to 1 instructor, and when we go out we'll be radioed up so you'll be able to hear me and hear what I say. You can't talk to me, but I can talk to you, and we go out for a ride and I'll give you instruction, but I'll also give you advice and I'll point you in the right direction of where to look and how to look and position your bike and all things like that. And towards the end of the ride I won't be giving you any advice, and I'll just be telling you turn left, turn right, or pull over. So come back after 2 hours, I'll write your certificate, shake your hand and wish you well, and then lots of people in the months and years afterwards come here for a brew and a chat, show us their bikes, and keep in touch. So that's a quick overview of the CBT, what you need to do, how you need to do it, and what we're now going to do is a series of videos showing you each of the aspects of element C: U-turn, emergency stop, figure of 8, all of those things, how you do them, and some of the common mistakes that people make. I hope you enjoyed the video, and that's over and out.